The sound of my son's car pulling away from Sunset Manor was the loneliest sound I had ever heard in my 73 years of life. My name is Delores Washington. I'm 73 years old, and I never thought my own children would abandon me like a piece of unwanted furniture just days before Christmas. I stood at the window of the Stark reception area, watching the red taillights disappear into the December evening. The admission papers were still warm in my hands, the ink barely dry on documents that would change my life forever. My daughter Sarah had signed them with such efficiency, barely looking at me as she scribbled her name next to the line marked "Responsible Party." My son Michael had stood behind her, checking his phone, acting like he had somewhere more important to be. "It's for the best, Mama," Sarah had said without meeting my eyes. "You can't keep living alone in that big house. What if you fall? What if something happens?" But I knew the truth. This wasn't about my safety. This was about my money. The social worker, a young woman with kind eyes named Jessica, approached me gently. "Mrs. Washington, let me show you to your room. I know this is a big adjustment, but we're going to take good care of you here." I followed her down the hallway, my small suitcase rolling behind me. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a harsh, institutional glow. The smell of disinfectant, mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Fear, maybe, or resignation. My room was small but clean. 2 beds, though the other was empty. A small dresser, a chair by the window, and a tiny bathroom. This was supposed to be my new home. Dinner is served at 5:30 in the main dining room. Jessica explained, her voice gentle. "There are activities every day, and visiting hours are from 10 to 8. Your family can come see you anytime during those hours." Family. I almost laughed at the word. My family had just dropped me off like a package they didn't want to deal with anymore. After Jessica left, I sat on the bed and looked around my new reality. How had it come to this? Just 6 months ago, I was living independently in the 4-bedroom house I had called home for 45 years. I cooked my own meals, tended my garden, drove myself to the grocery store and church. Sure, I had slowed down a bit, but I was far from helpless. The problem started when Michael lost his job. He was 48 years old, had been working in construction for 25 years, and suddenly found himself unemployed with a mortgage he couldn't pay. He came to me first, of course. He always did when money got tight. "Mama, I hate to ask, but could you help us out? Just until I get back on my feet," he had said, sitting at my kitchen table with his head in his hands. "Lisa's threatening to leave me if we lose the house. The kids are already struggling with all this stress." I had helped him before. When he wanted to start his own contracting business 10 years earlier, I gave him $15,000 to get started. When Sarah's husband left her with 3 kids and a mountain of debt, I paid off her credit cards and helped with the mortgage for 6 months. I had always been there for my children because that's what mothers do. So I wrote Michael a check for $12,000 to catch up his mortgage payments. I could afford it. After working as a school administrator for 35 years and living frugally, I had managed to save a substantial amount. The house was paid off, and I had investments and savings that totaled just over $400,000. Not wealthy by some standards, but comfortable enough to help my children when they needed it. But Michael's problems didn't end there. 2 months later, he was back, asking for money to fix his truck so he could work odd jobs. Then, it was money for his daughter's college expenses. Each time I said yes. Each time I told myself it was the last time. Sarah's requests were more subtle but equally persistent. Her air conditioning broke in the middle of summer and she needed $3,000 to replace it. Her son needed money for a school trip. Her car needed new tires. One request after another, each one presented as an emergency that only I could solve. I started to notice changes in how they treated me. The weekly Sunday dinners at my house became less frequent. The phone calls became shorter. When I mentioned wanting to update my will to ensure they were both taken care of, suddenly they had plenty of time to talk. You know, Mama, you should probably think about what's going to happen to all your money when you're gone. Sarah had said during one of our conversations, it would be awful if the government just took it all in taxes. Michael was more direct. You've got all that money just sitting in the bank, Mama. You could be doing so much more with it. Maybe we should talk to a financial planner about setting up some kind of trust or something. I should have seen the signs then, should have recognized the way they looked at me differently, like I was less a mother and more a resource to be managed. But I loved them. I had raised them by myself after their father died when they were just 12 and 14. I had worked 2 jobs to put them through school, sacrificed my own dreams to make sure they had everything they needed. Love, I thought, had to count for something. The final straw came when I had what Sarah dramatically called the incident. I had been cooking dinner and forgot about a pot on the stove. The bottom burned, the smoke alarm went off, and Mrs. Peterson next door came over to check on me. Nothing dangerous happened. No fire, no real damage, just a ruined pot and some smoke. But Sarah acted like I had nearly burned down the neighborhood. This is exactly what we've been worried about, she said, standing in my kitchen with her arms crossed. What if you had fallen asleep? What if you had left the house with the stove on? You could have killed yourself, Mama. Or worse, you could have hurt someone else. Michael nodded gravely. We can't keep worrying about you like this. It's not fair to any of us, including you. That's when they started talking about options. Adult day care centers, in-home nurses, and finally, the retirement home. Just think about it, Mama, Sarah had said. You'd have people around all the time. You wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or maintenance, and it would give us peace of mind knowing you're safe. What they didn't say, but what I clearly understood, was that it would also give them access to my house and my money without the inconvenience of having to check on me. I fought the idea for weeks. I argued that I was perfectly capable of living independently. I pointed out that one burned pot didn't make me incompetent. I reminded them of all the things I still did for myself, all the ways I was still sharp and capable. But they had made up their minds, and somehow they had convinced themselves that they were doing it for my own good. The paperwork appeared gradually. First, Sarah asked me to sign some documents that would give her power of attorney, just in case something happens. Then Michael brought papers that would make him the co-owner of my bank accounts to make things easier. If you need help managing your finances. Each document was presented as a simple precaution, a way to make sure I was protected. I signed them because I trusted my children, because I believed they had my best interests at heart, because I never imagined they would use those documents to control my life. The control started small. Sarah began helping me with my grocery shopping, insisting that she knew what I needed better than I did. Michael started handling my bills, saying it was too much for me to manage. They changed my bank statements to be mailed to Sarah's house, so nothing gets lost. Little by little, they took away my independence, and I let them because I thought they were trying to help. The morning they came to take me to Sunset Manor, I finally understood what had really been happening. They arrived with suitcases already packed, having gone through my things and decided what I would and wouldn't need in my new life. They had cleaned out my closets, packed up my personal items, and sorted through my belongings like I was already dead. We've taken care of everything, Mama, Sarah said cheerfully. Your room is all ready and we've handled all the financial arrangements. You don't need to worry about anything. That's when I realized they had signed me up for the most expensive care level at Sunset Manor. Private room, full meal plan, all activities included, round-the-clock medical supervision. The monthly cost was nearly $4,000, money that would come directly from my accounts that Michael now had access to. This seems like a lot, I had said, looking at the admission papers. Maybe we should look at some less expensive options. Mama, you deserve the best, Michael replied quickly. Besides, you can afford it. What's the point of having money if you don't use it to take care of yourself? But I knew better. They weren't concerned with what I deserved. They were concerned with spending down my savings as quickly as possible while keeping me out of the way. As I sat in my new room that first night, I started to piece together the real scope of what had happened. Over the past 6 months, I had given my children nearly $30,000 in various loans and emergencies. I had signed papers giving them control over my finances. And now I was in an expensive facility that would drain my remaining savings at a rate of almost $50,000 per year. At this rate, my life savings would be gone in less than 8 years. And then what? Would they keep me here? Would they move me somewhere cheaper? Or would they simply wash their hands of me entirely? I unpacked my few belongings and tried to make the small space feel like home. My favorite blanket went on the bed. A few family photos on the dresser, including one of Michael and Sarah when they were young and still looked at me with love instead of calculation. A small jewelry box that held my wedding ring and a few other precious pieces. That's when I realized something important. They hadn't taken everything. Hidden in the bottom of my jewelry box was something they didn't know existed: the key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown. Years ago, when my husband James was sick with cancer, he had insisted that we put aside some money that only I would know about. Just in case, he had said. Just in case something happens and the kids need help, or you need to take care of yourself. We had saved $20,000 in cash and put it in a safety deposit box, along with some important documents and my grandmother's jewelry. After James died, I had continued to add to it whenever I could. Every tax refund, every small windfall, every bit of money I could spare went into that box. Over the years, it had grown to nearly $70,000. I had never told Michael and Sarah about it because I never thought I would need it. It was my emergency fund, my insurance policy, my last resort. And now, sitting in this institutional room that smelled of disinfectant and defeat, I realized that emergency had arrived. Dinner that first night was a depressing affair. I sat at a table with 3 other women, all of whom seemed to have accepted their fate with quiet resignation. They talked about their medications, their children who visited less and less frequently, and the small dramas that made up life in a place like this. "You'll get used to it," said a woman named Betty, who had been there for 3 years. "The food's not terrible, and some of the activities are actually fun. Bingo on Tuesdays, movie night on Fridays. It's not so bad once you accept that this is your life now." But I wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. After dinner, I called Sarah to let her know I had settled in. She sounded distracted, like she was doing something else while talking to me. "That's great, Mama. I'm so glad you're there. You're going to love it. We'll come visit you this weekend, okay?" But the weekend came and went without a visit. When I called to ask where they were, Sarah said they had been too busy with Christmas preparations. "You understand, don't you, Mama? The kids have school programs and parties, and Michael's finally got some work lined up. We'll definitely come next week." Next week became the week after, which became sometime soon, which became when they could find the time. The excuses were always reasonable, always delivered with just enough guilt to make me feel bad for asking. But the message was clear. Now that I was tucked away safely, I was no longer a priority. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold. I sat by my window watching families arrive to pick up their loved ones for holiday celebrations. Cars filled with wrapped presents and excited children pulled up to the main entrance. Elderly residents emerged from the building with smiles on their faces, heading home for Christmas dinner and family time. I waited by that window until long after dark, hoping to see Michael's familiar blue truck or Sarah's red sedan. But they never came. At 8 o'clock, Jessica found me still sitting by the window. "Mrs. Washington, are you all right? Your dinner is getting cold." I turned to look at her, this young woman who had shown me more kindness in the past few weeks than my own children had shown me in months. "Jessica, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "In your experience, how often do children really visit their parents once they put them in a place like this?" Jessica sat down in the chair next to me. Her expression was gentle but honest. "It varies, Mrs. Washington. Some families visit every week, some come for holidays and special occasions, and some—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Some think that paying for care is the same as providing care. They convince themselves that as long as their parent is somewhere safe, they've done their duty." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "There's something else you should know," Jessica continued. "I've been working here for 5 years, and I've seen a pattern. Families who put their parents here suddenly, without including them in the decision, often have other motivations beyond safety and care." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes adult children see their aging parents as a financial burden or a source of money they want to access. Getting the parent into a care facility is a way to gain control while appearing to be responsible and caring." My heart sank, but I wasn't surprised. Jessica was confirming what I had already started to suspect. "Mrs. Washington, can I share something with you? Something I probably shouldn't say as an employee here?" I nodded. "You don't belong here. You're sharp, you're capable, and you're certainly not ready for the level of care you're paying for. I've been watching you for 3 weeks, and you're more independent than half the people we have in our assisted living wing, which costs half as much as what you're paying for full care. Then, why am I here?" "That's a question only your family can answer. But if I were you, I'd be asking some hard questions about my finances and my legal situation." That night, I lay awake thinking about everything Jessica had said. I thought about the power of attorney papers Sarah had asked me to sign. I thought about the bank account access I had given Michael. I thought about the expensive care level they had signed me up for without asking my opinion. And I started to get angry. The anger felt good. It felt better than the sadness and confusion I had been carrying around. Anger was something I could use. Anger could motivate me to action. The next morning, Christmas Day, I called Michael's house. Lisa answered the phone, and I could hear children laughing and Christmas music playing in the background. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Washington. Merry Christmas. Michael's not here right now. He's out with his brother looking at some property." Property? With what money, I wondered. "Could you have him call me when he gets back?" "Sure thing. We're planning to come see you next week sometime. The kids have been asking about you." But I knew they wouldn't come next week either, just like they hadn't come the week before or the week before that. After I hung up, I sat in my chair and looked out at the empty parking lot. Most of the residents had been picked up by their families for Christmas dinner. The few of us who remained would eat turkey and stuffing from the kitchen, served by staff members who probably wanted to be home with their own families. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit in this room and wait for my children to remember I existed. I wasn't going to let them slowly drain my life savings while pretending they were doing me a favor. And I wasn't going to let them get away with abandoning me just because it was convenient for them. I had spent my entire adult life taking care of other people. I had raised 2 children as a single mother, working multiple jobs to make sure they had everything they needed. I had given them money whenever they asked, supported them through every crisis, and loved them unconditionally even when they made mistakes. But love, I was learning, was not always returned in kind. And sometimes, the people you love most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. It was time to take back control of my life. It was time to show Michael and Sarah what it really meant to be abandoned by family. It was time to make them understand that their mother was not just a convenient source of money to be managed and controlled. I picked up the phone and called a taxi. "I need a ride to First National Bank downtown," I told the dispatcher, "and I'll need you to wait for me. I have several stops to make today." "Ma'am, it's Christmas Day. Most places are closed." The bank has 24-hour access to their safety deposit boxes for emergencies, and this definitely qualifies as an emergency. While I waited for the taxi, I gathered a few important items: my identification, the key to the safety deposit box, and a small notebook where I had kept track of all the money I had given to Michael and Sarah over the years. $32,000 in total, not counting the expenses for this place. I also took the original copies of the power of attorney documents they had asked me to sign. I had kept copies, something they probably didn't expect. As I read through them again, I realized how broad the powers were that I had given them. They could access my bank accounts, make financial decisions on my behalf, and even make healthcare decisions if they deemed me incapacitated. But there was something else in those documents that they had probably overlooked. There was a clause that allowed me to revoke the power of attorney at any time, as long as I was mentally competent to do so. And despite what they might think, I was definitely mentally competent. The taxi arrived, driven by a kind older man named Frank, who said he didn't mind working on Christmas because it gave other drivers time with their families. "Where are we headed?" he asked as I got into the back seat. "First, the bank. Then I need to make a few other stops. I have some business to take care of." As we drove through the quiet streets of the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a sense of purpose. For too long, I had been letting other people make decisions about my life. Today, that was going to change. The safety deposit box contained exactly what I remembered: $73,000 in cash, my grandmother's jewelry, and some important documents, including the original deed to my house. Money and assets that Michael and Sarah knew nothing about. My next stop was a lawyer's office. I had called ahead and found an attorney who was willing to meet me on Christmas Day for an emergency consultation. His fee was expensive, but I needed legal advice immediately. "Mrs. Washington," said attorney Robert Chen, "you're in a complex situation, but you're not powerless. The power of attorney your children have is broad, but it's not absolute. As long as you're mentally competent, you can revoke it at any time. You can also make changes to your will, your bank accounts, and your living situation. What would you recommend?" "First, we revoke the power of attorney immediately. Then, we set up new bank accounts that only you control. After that, we review your living situation and make sure you have the legal right to make your own decisions about where and how you live." "And my money? The money they've already spent?" "That's more complicated. If you gave it willingly, even under pressure, it may be difficult to recover, but we can certainly make sure they don't have access to any more of your funds." We spent 2 hours going through paperwork and legal documents. By the time I left his office, I had revoked the power of attorney, set up a new bank account with the money from my safety deposit box, and put together a plan to regain control of my finances. My final stop of the day was the most important one: the house I had called home for 45 years. I still had my key and I was still legally the owner. Sarah and Michael had been using the house for storage and had talked about selling it to help pay for my care, but they couldn't sell it without my signature. Walking through my empty house was like walking through a museum of my former life. The furniture was still there, covered with sheets. My books were still on the shelves. My piano, the one I had bought with my first paycheck as a school administrator, sat silent in the living room. But the house felt different, abandoned, like a place where someone used to live but didn't anymore. I went to my bedroom and opened the closet. Most of my clothes were gone, taken by Sarah when she packed my things for the nursing home. But in the very back, behind some old coats, I found what I was looking for: a box of Christmas decorations. I carried the box to the living room and began to decorate. I put up my small artificial tree, the one I had used for the past 10 years, since I decided a real tree was too much trouble. I hung the ornaments that told the story of my life. Handmade decorations Michael and Sarah had made in school, ornaments from family vacations, a special ornament I bought the year James and I were married. Each ornament brought back memories of better times. Christmases when my children were young and excited about Santa Claus. Family dinners where everyone laughed and talked and seemed genuinely happy to be together. Times when I felt loved and appreciated, not like a burden to be managed. As I decorated, I thought about what I wanted to do next. I could move back into this house. I could hire someone to help me with the heavy cleaning and maintenance, and I could live independently again. I had enough money to make that work, especially now that I had control of my finances again. But there was something else I wanted to do first. Something that would send a clear message to Michael and Sarah about the consequences of their actions. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to be abandoned by the people you love most. I picked up the phone and called both of their houses. When I got their voicemail systems, I left the same message. Michael, Sarah, this is your mother. I wanted to let you know that I've had some time to think about my situation and I've made some decisions. I'm not going to be at Sunset Manor anymore. I've decided to make some changes in my life, changes that I think you'll find very interesting. I'll be in touch soon. Then I called Sunset Manor and spoke to Jessica. Jessica, this is Delores Washington. I wanted to let you know that I won't be returning to the facility. I've decided to make other arrangements. Mrs. Washington, are you sure about this? You'll need to give 30 days notice, and there are financial obligations to consider. The financial obligations will be handled. As for the 30 days notice, I think you'll find that the people who signed me up for this arrangement will be very motivated to handle the paperwork quickly. After I hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by Christmas decorations and thought about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was 73 years old, but I wasn't dead. I wasn't helpless, and I certainly wasn't ready to be warehoused in a facility because it was convenient for my children. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I felt strong and capable and angry enough to fight for the life I wanted to live. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed Sarah's number. Mama, what's going on? We got your message and we're worried about you. Where are you? I'm at home, Sarah. My home. The house where I lived for 45 years before you decided I was too much trouble to deal with. Mama, you can't just leave the facility like that. You have obligations. There are contracts and payments and… Oh, I know all about the payments, Sarah. $4,000 a month for care I didn't need, paid for with money I earned and saved. Money that you and Michael now control without asking me what I wanted. There was silence on the other end of the line. We were trying to help you, Mama. We were worried about your safety. No, you weren't. You were worried about your inheritance. You were worried that I might live too long and spend too much of the money you've already decided belongs to you. That's not true. We love you. We just wanted to make sure you were taken care of. If you wanted to take care of me, you would have visited me more than once in 3 weeks. If you wanted to take care of me, you would have asked me what I wanted instead of making decisions for me. If you wanted to take care of me, you wouldn't have abandoned me in that place on Christmas Eve. I could hear Sarah crying on the other end of the line, but I wasn't finished. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I've revoked the power of attorney you asked me to sign. I've taken control of my own finances again. And I've made some decisions about my future that you're not going to like. What do you mean? I mean that I'm done being manipulated and controlled by my own children. I'm done being treated like a burden instead of a person. And I'm definitely done paying for expensive care I don't need while you pretend you're doing me a favor. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Within minutes, my cell phone started ringing. Michael, then Sarah, then Michael again. I let them all go to voicemail. That night, I stayed in my own house for the first time in 3 weeks. I slept in my own bed, ate food from my own kitchen, and felt like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. But I knew this was just the beginning. Michael and Sarah would not give up easily. They would argue that I was being irrational, that I was putting myself in danger, that I was making a mistake. They would probably try to have me declared incompetent or find some other way to regain control. That's why I needed to be smart about my next moves. I needed to make sure they understood that their actions had consequences. I needed to show them what it really meant to lose the support and love of a parent. And I had an idea that would do exactly that. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in weeks and felt more alive than I had in months. The morning light streaming through my familiar bedroom windows reminded me of thousands of other mornings I had started in this house. But this morning felt different. This morning, I had a purpose. I made myself a real breakfast in my own kitchen. Real eggs, not the powdered ones they served at Sunset Manor. Toast from bread I had chosen myself. Coffee that was strong enough to actually wake me up. Simple pleasures that I had forgotten I was missing. As I ate, I thought about the phone calls I needed to make and the plan that had been forming in my mind all night. My children had made their choice when they decided to treat me like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. Now, they were going to learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that kind of treatment. I started with my bank. Even though it was the day after Christmas, I was able to reach the customer service line and confirm that my new account was active and that all automatic payments to Sunset Manor had been stopped. The representative also helped me put a freeze on my old accounts, the ones Michael had access to, until I could get to the branch in person to close them completely. Mrs. Washington, the representative said, I want to make sure you understand that this will stop all automatic payments and transfers from these accounts. If you have bills that are automatically paid, you'll need to set up new payment arrangements. That's exactly what I want, I replied. I want complete control over every penny that goes in and out of my accounts. My next call was to my insurance company. I needed to understand exactly what my coverage would be if I chose to live independently again, and what kind of home care services might be available if I needed them in the future. The conversation was enlightening. My insurance would cover home health services if I needed them, including nursing care, physical therapy, and even housekeeping services. The cost would be a fraction of what Sunset Manor was charging, and I would be able to stay in my own home. Mrs. Washington, many of our clients find that a combination of home services and family support allows them to maintain their independence much longer than they expected, the insurance representative explained. Have you discussed these options with your family? My family is part of the problem, I said. They seem to think that expensive institutional care is the only option. That's unfortunate. Often, families choose the most expensive option because they think it's the best, when really it's just the most convenient for them. After I finished my calls, I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began to write. I was going to write 3 letters, one to each of my children and one to my grandchildren. But these weren't going to be the kind of letters a grandmother usually writes. The letter to Michael was first. Dear Michael, by now you know that I've left Sunset Manor and revoked the power of attorney I gave you. I want you to understand why I made these decisions. Over the past 6 months, you've asked me for over $15,000 for various emergencies. I gave you that money because I love you and because I believed you would pay it back when you were able to. But you never intended to pay it back, did you? You saw my savings as your inheritance, money that you were entitled to because you're my son. When you realized I might live long enough to spend that money on myself, you decided to warehouse me in an expensive facility where I would be out of the way, while my savings were drained as quickly as possible. That's not love, Michael. That's greed. You chose money over your mother, and now you're going to live with the consequences of that choice. The letter to Sarah was longer and more detailed. Dear Sarah, you were always the smart one, the planner, the one who thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I'm sure you thought you had everything figured out when you convinced me to sign those power of attorney papers. You probably felt very clever when you started managing my bills and my medical appointments, slowly taking control of my life piece by piece. You presented every step as helping me, as protecting me, as doing what was best for me. But we both know the truth. You weren't protecting me from anything except my own right to make decisions about my own life. You saw an opportunity to control my money and my choices, and you took it. What you didn't count on was that your 73-year-old mother is still smart enough to recognize manipulation when she sees it. You underestimated me, Sarah, and that was your mistake. But the third letter, the one to my grandchildren, was the most important. Dear Marcus, Jennifer, David, Ashley, and little Emma, I'm writing to tell you something that your parents probably won't tell you themselves. Your grandmother didn't choose to live in a retirement home. Your parents put me there because it was convenient for them and because they wanted control over my money. They told you I needed special care, but that wasn't true. They told you it was for my own safety, but that wasn't true either. The truth is that your parents decided I was more valuable to them as a source of money than as a person who deserved love and respect. I want you to know this because someday, when you're older, you might have to make decisions about your own parents' care. I want you to remember that love isn't about convenience or money. Love is about spending time with people, listening to them, and treating them like they matter. Your parents forgot that lesson, and now they're going to learn what it feels like to be treated the way they treated me. I sealed all 3 letters in envelopes and set them aside. They would be delivered at the right time, as part of a larger plan that was still taking shape in my mind. The phone started ringing around noon. First Michael, then Sarah, then Michael again. I let them all go to voicemail. Their messages became increasingly frantic as the day went on. Mama, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Mom, you're scaring us. We just want to make sure you're okay. Mama, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear like this. We're your family. Family. They kept using that word like it meant something to them. But family is more than shared DNA. Family is about being there for each other, supporting each other, and putting each other's needs before your own convenience. By that definition, my children had stopped being family months ago. That evening, I heard a car in my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Sarah's red sedan. She was alone, which surprised me. I had expected them to come together, to present a united front. I watched her walk up to my front door, and I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was preparing for a fight. When she knocked, I took my time answering. Hello, Sarah. Mama, thank God you're okay. We've been so worried. She pushed past me into the living room, and I could see her taking in the Christmas decorations, the signs that I had been living here, taking care of myself. We need to talk about this situation, she said, settling into my favorite chair like she owned the place. You can't just run away from your responsibilities like this. My responsibilities? I sat down across from her, keeping my voice calm. What responsibilities are those, Sarah? Your responsibility to take care of yourself. Your responsibility to make smart decisions about your health and safety. Your responsibility to think about how your actions affect other people. You mean my responsibility to make things convenient for you and Michael. That's not fair, Mama. Everything we did was for your own good. Was it for my own good when you didn't visit me for 3 weeks? Was it for my own good when you left me alone at that place on Christmas Eve? Was it for my own good when you signed me up for the most expensive care level without asking what I wanted? Sarah's composure started to crack. We thought you would be happy there. We thought you would make friends and enjoy the activities. You thought I would be out of the way so you could start spending my money without having to worry about what I thought about it. We never spent your money, Mama. Every penny went to your care. I got up and walked to my desk, where I had prepared a folder full of documents, bank statements, receipts, legal papers, evidence of everything that had happened over the past 6 months. Sarah, let's talk about money, since that seems to be what really matters to you. I opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. In the past 6 months, you and Michael have asked me for $32,000 in loans and gifts. Did you know I kept track? She looked uncomfortable, but didn't respond. The care at Sunset Manor costs $48,000 per year. Did you shop around for less expensive options? Did you ask me what I could afford? Did you consider that at that rate, my savings would be gone in less than 8 years? Mama, you deserve the best care available. No, Sarah, you wanted me in the most expensive place available because it would drain my money faster. You wanted my inheritance spent on my care, so you wouldn't have to feel guilty about taking it from me directly. The accusations hung in the air between us. Sarah's face went through several expressions, from shock to anger to something that might have been shame. That's not true, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. Then prove it. Show me that you researched other options. Show me that you considered what I wanted. Show me that you thought about anything other than getting me out of your way as quickly and conveniently as possible. She couldn't, of course, because none of those things had happened. Mama, even if that were true, even if we made mistakes, running away isn't the answer. You need to come back to the facility. You need proper care. I need my family to treat me like a person instead of a problem. I need my children to love me more than they love my money. I need to be included in decisions about my own life. You're being dramatic, Mama. We love you. No, you love my bank account. There's a difference. Sarah stood up, and I could see that she was getting angry. Fine. If that's how you want to see it, then I'll be blunt. You're 73 years old, Mama. You burned a pot on the stove. You're forgetting things. You need supervision, whether you want to admit it or not. I forgot about one pot, Sarah. One time. That doesn't make me incompetent. It's not just the pot. You've been acting strangely for months. Paranoid. Suspicious. Maybe you're not as sharp as you think you are. And there it was. The argument they would use if they decided to challenge my competency. The suggestion that my resistance to their control was actually evidence of mental decline. Sarah, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Yesterday, I met with a lawyer. I revoked your power of attorney, set up new bank accounts, and made arrangements to protect my legal and financial interests. Does that sound like the behavior of someone who's mentally incompetent? Her face went pale. You did what? I took back control of my own life, the same thing you would do if someone was trying to manipulate and control you. Mama, you can't do this. You're making a huge mistake. The mistake was trusting my children to put my needs before their own convenience. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out her next move. What do you want, Mama? What will it take to resolve this situation? I want you and Michael to understand what you've done. I want you to experience what it feels like to be abandoned by the people you love most. And I want to make sure you never have the opportunity to control or manipulate me again. What does that mean? It means I'm going to give away my money, Sarah, all of it. Every penny you and Michael have been counting on inheriting is going to go to people and organizations that actually deserve it. The blood drained from her face. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I've already started the process. By the time I'm finished, there won't be anything left for you to fight over. Mama, that's crazy. That's vindictive and cruel. Is it more cruel than abandoning your mother in a nursing home on Christmas Eve? Is it more vindictive than taking control of someone's life without their permission? Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of anger and frustration. You're doing this to hurt us, you're punishing us for trying to take care of you. I'm teaching you a lesson about consequences. You treated me like my money was more important than my feelings. Now you get to find out what it's like to lose both. The grandchildren, Mama. Think about the grandchildren. That money could pay for their college, their futures. The grandchildren will be fine. Their parents can work and save and sacrifice for their futures, just like I did for you and Michael, just like every other parent in the world does. Sarah stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. This is insane, Mama. You've lost your mind. No rational person would give away their life savings out of spite. It's not spite, Sarah, it's justice. You wanted my money more than you wanted me. Now you get neither. She headed for the door, then turned back. We won't let you do this. We'll fight you. We'll have you declared incompetent if we have to. Good luck with that. I've already been evaluated by a psychiatrist as part of my legal planning. I'm mentally competent, and I have the legal right to do whatever I want with my own money. After Sarah left, I sat in my living room and felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I was the one in control. I was the one making decisions. I was the one with the power. The next morning, I began putting my plan into action. My first stop was the office of United Way, where I met with a development director named Patricia Williams. Mrs. Washington, what you're proposing is certainly generous, but I want to make sure you've thought this through completely. This is a substantial donation. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. I want to establish a fund that provides emergency assistance to elderly people who are being financially exploited by their families. Patricia looked surprised. That's a very specific focus. It's a very specific problem. You'd be amazed how many older people are manipulated and controlled by their own children. I want to help them fight back. We spent 2 hours discussing the details. The fund would provide legal assistance, temporary housing, and financial support for elderly people who were trying to escape family financial abuse. It would be called the James Washington Memorial Fund, after my late husband. My second stop was the offices of 3 different charities that provided services to seniors. I arranged for significant donations to programs that helped older people live independently in their own homes. Meal delivery services, transportation programs, home health services, and social programs that combated isolation and loneliness. By the end of the week, I had committed over $200,000 to various charitable organizations, but I wasn't finished yet. My final stop was the most important one, the office of my lawyer, Robert Chen. Mrs. Washington, I need to ask you one more time. Are you certain about these changes to your will? I'm absolutely certain. The new will was simple and direct. After a few small bequests to close friends and my church, the remainder of my estate would go to the charitable fund I had established. Michael and Sarah would inherit exactly $1 each, along with a letter explaining why. What about your house? Attorney Chen asked. The house will be sold, and the proceeds will go to the fund as well. I don't want my children to inherit anything they can fight over or sell for profit. And your personal belongings? Those will go to my grandchildren, along with letters explaining what really happened and why I made these choices. As I signed the new will, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because this wasn't how I had imagined my life ending. I had hoped to leave my children a legacy that would help them and their families. I had wanted my life's work and savings to benefit the people I loved most. But my children had made their choice. They had chosen money over love, convenience over care, control over respect. Now they would have to live with the consequences of that choice. The relief came from knowing that my money would actually help people who needed it. the elderly people who would receive legal aid when their families tried to exploit them, the seniors who would be able to stay in their own homes because of the services my donations would fund, the grandparents who would avoid being warehoused in expensive facilities against their will. My money would still help people. It just wouldn't help the people who had betrayed me. A week later, I received a visit from both of my children together. They had clearly coordinated their approach, and they came with what they probably thought was a reasonable compromise. "Mama, we've been talking, and we think we understand why you're upset," Michael said as they sat on my couch. "We realize we made some mistakes in how we handled your care situation. We want to make things right," Sarah added. "We're prepared to bring you home and hire someone to help you here, if that's what you want." I looked at both of them, these adults who had once been the center of my world, and I felt nothing but disappointment. "What you're offering now is what you should have offered 6 months ago, before you took control of my finances, before you put me in that place against my will, before you abandoned me there for weeks." "We know we made mistakes, Mama, but we can fix this," Michael insisted. "We can start over. Can you give me back the 3 weeks I spent in that place, wondering why my children didn't love me anymore? Can you give me back the Christmas Eve I spent alone while you were with your families? Can you give me back the trust I had in you before I realized you cared more about my money than my happiness?" They looked at each other, unsure how to respond. "We can't change the past," Sarah said finally, "but we can do better in the future." "The future is exactly what I'm worried about. What happens the next time you decide I'm too much trouble to deal with? What happens when you decide I really am too old to live independently? What happens when you decide that controlling my life is easier than respecting my choices?" "That won't happen again," Michael said. "We promise." "Your promises don't mean anything to me anymore. You promised to take care of me, and then you abandoned me. You promised the nursing home was temporary, and then you stopped visiting. You promised you were looking out for my best interests, and then you tried to drain my savings as quickly as possible." I stood up and walked to my desk, where I had prepared copies of all the legal documents I had signed in the past week. "I want you both to understand something very clearly. I have revoked every power of attorney I gave you. I have closed every bank account you had access to. I have changed my will to exclude both of you from inheriting anything of significance, and I have donated most of my money to charitable organizations that actually help people." The silence in the room was deafening. "You can't have done all that," Sarah said finally. "You can't just give away everything." "I can, and I have. The money you were counting on, the inheritance you thought you were entitled to, the financial security you thought you could control, it's gone." Michael stood up, his face red with anger. "This is insane, Mama. You're destroying our futures, the grandchildren's futures, out of spite." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm redirecting my money to people who will appreciate it and use it to help others, instead of people who saw it as their entitlement." "We're your children," Sarah said, crying again. "We're your family. How can you do this to us?" "You stopped being my family when you decided I was too much trouble to deal with. Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't manipulate and control each other. Family doesn't choose money over love." They left that day angry and defeated, but I knew they would be back. People don't give up on that much money without a fight. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I received a legal notice. Michael and Sarah were challenging my competency, claiming that my recent actions were evidence of mental decline and that my charitable donations should be reversed. I wasn't surprised, but I was prepared. Attorney Chen had anticipated this possibility, and we had already gathered evidence of my mental competency. Medical evaluations, psychiatric assessments, detailed financial records showing that my decisions were rational and well-planned. The competency hearing was scheduled for February, which gave me 2 months to prepare. But I had something else to do first. I arranged to have lunch with each of my grandchildren individually. Marcus was 22 and in college. Jennifer was 19 and working part-time while taking classes. David was 16 and still in high school. Ashley was 14 and just starting to understand adult relationships. Little Emma was only 8, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to know that the family was fighting. I started with Marcus, the oldest. We met at a restaurant near his college campus, and I could see that he was uncomfortable. His parents had obviously prepared him for this conversation. "Grandma, Mom and Dad told me about what's happening. They said you're upset with them." "Marcus, what else did they tell you?" "They said you gave away all your money to charity and that you're mad at them for putting you in the nursing home." "Is that all they told you?" He shifted in his seat. "They said you might not be thinking clearly, that sometimes older people make decisions that don't make sense when they're upset or confused." I reached into my purse and pulled out a letter I had written for him. "Marcus, I want you to read this letter. It explains exactly what happened and why I made the decisions I made. After you read it, I want you to tell me if you think I'm confused, or if you think I'm a woman who got tired of being treated badly by her own children." He read the letter in silence, and I watched his expression change from skepticism to understanding to anger. "Grandma, is this all true? Did they really put you in that place just to get control of your money?" "What do you think, Marcus? You're smart enough to figure out the truth for yourself." "I think they messed up. I think they treated you terribly, and now they're trying to make it seem like you're the one with the problem." "And what do you think about my decision to give my money to charity instead of leaving it to them?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I think it's your money, and you should be able to do whatever you want with it, and I think maybe they need to learn that actions have consequences." I had similar conversations with Jennifer and David, both of whom were old enough to understand what had really happened. They were disappointed that their college funds were gone, but they were more disappointed in their parents' behavior. Ashley was harder to talk to. At 14, she was caught between childhood and adulthood, old enough to understand that something serious was happening, but young enough to still believe that her parents could do no wrong. "Grandma, why are you being so mean to Mom and Dad? They were just trying to help you." "Ashley, do you think it's helpful to put someone in a place they don't want to be and then never visit them? Maybe they were busy." "Do you think it's helpful to take control of someone's money without asking them what they want? Maybe they thought you needed help managing it." Ashley wasn't ready to see her parents clearly yet, but that was okay. She would understand when she was older. Little Emma just wanted to know when the family would stop fighting and when everyone would be happy again. I didn't have a good answer for her. The competency hearing took place on a cold February morning. The courtroom was small and sterile, nothing like the dramatic courtrooms you see on television. Michael and Sarah sat with their lawyer on one side of the room. I sat with Attorney Chen on the other side. Their lawyer presented their case first. They argued that my decision to give away my life savings was evidence of mental decline, that no rational person would deprive their own children of their inheritance out of anger over a family disagreement. They brought in a psychiatrist who testified that elderly people sometimes make irrational financial decisions when they feel abandoned or angry. They presented evidence of the burnt pot incident and argued that it showed I was no longer capable of living safely on my own. Then it was our turn. Attorney Chen presented evidence of my mental competency, recent medical evaluations, psychiatric assessments, and detailed documentation of my financial planning process. He showed that my charitable donations were carefully planned and legally executed, not impulsive decisions made in anger. I testified on my own behalf, explaining clearly and calmly why I had made the decisions I made. I described the pattern of financial requests from my children, the way they had gradually taken control of my life, and the way they had abandoned me at the nursing home. The psychiatrist we hired testified that my decisions were rational responses to family financial abuse, and that my actions showed clear thinking and appropriate boundary setting. The judge listened to everything, asked several questions, and then made her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Mrs. Washington is mentally competent to make her own financial and legal decisions. Her charitable donations appear to be the result of careful planning, not mental incapacity. The petition to reverse these donations is denied. Michael and Sarah's faces went white. They had been so certain that they could convince a judge I was incompetent, so sure that they could get control of my money back. But they had underestimated their 73-year-old mother one more time. As we left the courthouse, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Mama, please. This doesn't have to be the end. We can still work things out. We can still be a family." I looked at her for a long moment, this daughter I had loved and raised and sacrificed for, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel, pity. "Sarah, we could have been a family 6 months ago if you had treated me like a person instead of a problem. We could have been a family 3 months ago if you had included me in decisions about my own life. We could have been a family on Christmas Eve if you had visited me instead of leaving me alone. We can start over, Mama. We can do better. You've had multiple chances to do better. You chose not to take them." I walked away from them that day, and I haven't spoken to either of them since. 6 months later, I'm still living in my own house, still taking care of myself, still making my own decisions about my own life. I have a housekeeper who comes twice a week to help with the heavy cleaning. I have a driver who takes me places when I don't want to drive myself. I have friends from church who check on me regularly and invite me to social activities. I'm not isolated or lonely or abandoned. I'm independent and strong and surrounded by people who actually care about me as a person, not as a source of money. The charitable fund I established is already helping elderly people who are being exploited by their families. We've provided legal assistance to 12 people in the past 6 months, and we've helped 4 people escape situations where their children were controlling their finances inappropriately. My grandchildren visit me regularly, especially Marcus and Jennifer, who have come to understand what really happened and why I made the choices I made. David comes by after school sometimes to help me with yard work and to talk about his plans for college. Ashley is starting to ask more questions about what happened, and I think she's beginning to see her parents more clearly. Even little Emma comes to see me, usually with one of her older siblings. We bake cookies and work in the garden and read books together. She doesn't understand the adult conflicts, but she knows that her grandmother loves her and that love doesn't depend on money or inheritance. Michael and Sarah have tried to contact me several times, usually around holidays or birthdays. They send cards and flowers and messages saying they miss me and want to reconcile. But they never acknowledge what they did wrong. They never apologize for treating me the way they did. They never take responsibility for their choices. They still think this is about money. They still think I'm punishing them for trying to help me. They still don't understand that this is about respect and dignity and being treated like a human being who deserves to make her own choices about her own life. Maybe they'll never understand. Maybe they're too invested in seeing themselves as the victims of their unreasonable mother's vindictive behavior. But I understand something they don't. I won. I won because I took back control of my life. I won because I stood up for myself when no one else would. I won because I showed them that their mother was stronger and smarter than they thought. I won because I turned their abandonment into my independence, their manipulation into my empowerment, their greed into something that actually helps people. Most importantly, I won because I learned the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. That lesson was worth every penny I gave away. I'm 73 years old, and I'm not done living yet. I have friends to see, books to read, gardens to tend, and grandchildren to spoil. I have charitable work to oversee and legal battles to support for other elderly people who are fighting for their dignity. I have a life to live, and for the first time in months, it's a life I'm living on my own terms. My children made their choice when they decided money was more important than love. Now they have to live with the consequences of that choice, just like I had to live with the consequences of trusting them. The difference is, I'm happy with how things turned out. They dropped me off at a retirement home before Christmas, thinking they were solving their problem. Instead, they created a much bigger problem for themselves. And I'm not sorry about it at all.